Hey guys, so today I want to explain the 12 zodiac signs to you and also show you how I illustrated them for a recent series that I made. I know whenever we talk about astrology, it can very easily go into woo-woo territory. To that, I just want to say, whether or not you believe in astrology or not, the 12 zodiac signs nevertheless are really interesting archetypes, all with their own seemingly random set of personality traits. And that was really what I was exploring in these illustrations. I also want to note that even though I put a lot of research into this, tried my best to portray each of the signs as closely as possible to how they are normally portrayed. At the end of the day, the illustrations that you see, the visuals that you see, are still based on my own creative interpretation. So without further ado, let's get into this. I hope you like what I have to show you. So for Aries, I wrote that they are assertive, pioneering, energetic, direct, and bold. And for the flower and gemstone, or birthstone, I'll be using gemstone and birthstone interchangeably, by the way. For the flower and gemstone, I have honeysuckle and bloodstone. So Aries are the firecrackers of the signs. They are really spontaneous and they don't like to wave around for too long. And because they are energetic, they're typically portrayed as an athlete. But I kind of wanted to stay away from that stereotypical representation and instead show someone with a really badass attitude. In this case, it's someone that I can imagine going to a punk show, which are normally really energetic and rowdy, and I feel like that's an environment an Aries would really enjoy. But at the same time, I wanted this to be someone who is very minimalistic in their style, so they don't have to be too flashy to still show that they've got some spunk. So next up we have Taurus, and for Taurus I wrote that they are calm, dependable, stubborn, sensual, and persevering. For the flower and birthstone I have poppy and sapphire. And Taurus, as a true earth sign, are just beasts for sensual earthly pleasures. They're really down to earth, which makes them very calm, but they're also really grounded and hardworking. And they will also stand their ground if you try to cross them. So for this illustration, I wanted to portray someone who really embodies that boho chic, so comfortable yet luxurious. And I also wanted to show someone who would probably go on a picnic or fruit picking or something like that. Someone that really enjoys spending time outside and literally enjoying the fruits of nature. Next up we have Gemini, and for Gemini I wrote that they are versatile, expressive, social, inquisitive, and witty. For the flower and the gemstone I have lily of the valley and aquamarine. Gemini is the social butterfly of the signs. They are really curious about the world around them and love being engaged with it. They are often seen as two-faced, after all they are the twins, but I like to actually interpret them as being really adaptable to different social situations. And even in their use of language, they are quite adaptable, which is exemplified by their wit. For Gemini, I wanted to portray someone who is very trendy, very aware of social movements around them. And I also wanted to show someone who just is really enthusiastic about social events. So for this person, I imagined them passing out flyers for a punk show or something like that. Maybe even the same punk show that Aries is going to. Alright, so next up we have Cancer, and for Cancer I wrote that they are nurturing, contemplative, protective, hospitable, and sensitive. For the flower and birthstone I have white rose and amber. So Cancer is the crab of the signs, and much like their namesake, they have a hard outer armor and a really soft, tender interior. And because of that, they're often seen as defensive, but I like to see them as very protective of themselves and the people that they love, rightfully so, against a harsh outside world. And because of this, they also don't really like to draw so much attention to themselves. They are often described as like approaching life walking sideways like a crab, which I thought was really interesting. So you might have a hard time getting a Cancer to open up, but once they do, you will discover that they are extremely sensitive and thoughtful and nurturing human beings. So for this person, I want to illustrate someone who had a very warm and soft vibe to them, and I also wanted to show them holding a potted plant just to emphasize that nurturing nature that they have. And I can easily imagine this person being someone who has like dozens of plants at home or something like that. So next up we have Leo, and for Leo I wrote that they are lavish, vivacious, ambitious, loyal, and generous. And for the flower and gemstone I have marigold and onyx. So Leos are the life of the party. They walk into any room and they light it up. And because of this, they're often seen as attention-seeking, but I just like to think that they have such a zest for life that they can't help but draw attention towards themselves. The wonderful thing about Leos, though, is that they're not selfish. They are actually very loyal and generous friends. So you can count on Leos to burst through life at 110% and take you with them. Now we have Virgo. Virgos are responsible, analytical, perfectionist, helpful, and conscientious. For the flower and gemstone, I have chrysanthemum and carnelian. Virgos are the team players of the signs. They're very conscientious of the people around them, and they like to make it their purpose and mission in life to be helpful to society. They're also very conscientious about themselves, and therefore they are quite the perfectionists, which can be their downfall. But the positive side to this is that you can count on anything that they do to be impeccably done. So for this character, I wanted to illustrate someone who is a classical musician. And the reason for this is I feel that with classical music training, it's normally quite strict. And I feel like a Virgo would thrive in such a rule-oriented environment. I also think that when you play classical music, it's normally in an orchestra, and so you have to be very conscientious of the people around you, and you have to be a really responsible team player. And finally, just as an extra, I wanted to have the pattern of the dress reflect the analytical nature that Virgos are also known for. So next up we have Libra, and Libras are fair, sociable, aesthetic, peaceful, and diplomatic. Their flower and gemstone are bluebells and lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli? Lapis lazuli. That really beautiful, very blue stone. So as I just alluded to, Libras are the diplomats of the signs. They like to stay away from conflict. Their desire is to see life through a fair and balanced lens. Interestingly, they're also known for having very refined tastes, and the more I thought about this, the more this actually made a lot of sense, because if you think of classical architecture, for instance, from the Greek times, it's all very symmetrical and balanced. And this is because the ancient Greeks saw symmetry and balance as the ideal form of beauty in architecture and also in art, I think. Well, it was mainly in architecture. So in the same spirit, Libras really gravitate towards any kind of style and aesthetic that is more classical and timeless in nature. So I wanted to illustrate someone who is very stylish, but in a more classical sense. And I also wanted to show someone who is a photographer. So literally someone who views the world through a compositionally balanced lens, the same as photographers often do. Next up we have Scorpio, and for them I wrote that they are intuitive, passionate, committed, focused, and cunning. Their flower and gemstone are geranium and topaz. Scorpios are a very misunderstood sign. When I was researching them, I kept reading everywhere that they're like a dark sign and they're very in touch with their dark side and they're very calculated and blah 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 blah. But for each of the signs, I really wanted to try my best to focus on their good sides. So for Scorpios, I just concluded that they are very focused and committed to whatever they are focused and committed on. They're very in touch with their gut intuition, and they're also very patient, so they'll kind of just sit and wait for their opportunity to come, and when it does, they just go and grab it and run with it. And this is what makes them very cunning. And I think this is actually a very aspirational trait. So for this character, this person, I wanted to illustrate someone who is very into football. And the reason for this is because I think in the game of football, and by that I mean soccer for you American English speakers out there, I think you have to be very focused and committed in what is often a very stressful game. And when your moment comes, which often comes in a very spontaneous split second, you have to grab it and you have to go with it and seize that moment without hesitation. And I think that Scorpio personality would really excel in doing something like that. So next up we have Sagittarius, and for Sagittarius I wrote that they are humorous, restless, adventurous, independent, and straightforward. The flower and birthstone are carnation and turquoise. So Sagittarius really like traveling. They're constantly on the go and they're super restless. Even in their quest for knowledge, they're super adventurous. They always want to learn something new. And they definitely do not want to be tied down. However, they're also really good company to have around, as they really like to entertain and humor people. And they're also the kind of people who'll just tell it like it is. So for this illustration, I wanted to show someone who is quite literally on the go, traveling. And I wanted to play with this idea of travel and adventurousness in the pattern of the shirt, which looks like a map. Then we have Capricorn. Capricorns are reserved, tenacious, resilient, wise, and practical. For the flower and birthstone, I have Pansy and Ruby. Capricorns are the really wise and hardworking ones of the signs. Similar to Scorpio, they're also very patient and committed, but I think they're maybe a little bit less opportunistic. Instead, I think they're very humble, despite also being very tough, which I think is a very admirable trait. For this person, I wanted to illustrate someone who has a very practical and minimalistic style, because this is someone who is very pragmatic and just focused on getting stuff done. And of course I had to draw a planner in one of their hands because these guys have their figured out. For Aquarius, I wrote that they are inventive, opinionated, humanitarian, individualistic, and eccentric. These guys are the advocates of the signs. They are constantly trying to push boundaries to see the world in a new and different way, especially when it comes to making the world a better place. They're also often seen as aloof and very emotionally distant, but I think this is only because they're so focused on their humanitarian mission that they try to not really focus so much on their own emotions. Similar to Libras, they strive for fairness and justice in the world, but unlike Libras, Aquarius people are not afraid to tell you what is exactly on their mind. These guys are very opinionated. So for this person, I wanted to illustrate someone who definitely has a more eccentric look, someone who stands out. I wanted to illustrate someone who is book smart, because probably they're always trying to read about new ways to make the world a better place. I wanted this person to be a very vocal supporter of LGBTQ rights, possibly a member of the LGBTQ community, because out of all the signs, I think this would be the most likely advocate. And finally, we have Pisces. For Pisces, I wrote that they are pensive, imaginative, compassionate, tender, and open-minded. Their flower and birthstone are water lily and amethyst. Pisces are the dreamy empaths of the signs. They have these vast imaginations, which not only makes them really dreamy and kind of head up in the clouds, which I think is really funny somehow because they're symbolized by fish, and yet they're kind of really head up in the clouds kind of vibe. They also are very open-minded and feeling towards other people because of this imagination. I think it's very interesting that Aquarius gets all the credit for being the artsy one of the signs, but I think it should actually be Pisces because they're the ones with the imagination and the dreaminess. So Pisces should get more credit for being the artsy one, which is why for this character I wanted to illustrate someone who is an artist and also has that dreamy look on their face. Alright, so that was my explanation of all of the 12 different zodiac signs. I hope that you enjoyed my interpretation. I hope that somehow, if you didn't know that much about zodiac signs before, that I was able to help you understand them more. Give me a like if you want to see more videos like this, or just if you want to show me support and you like this. Leave any of your questions and comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!